Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Extra Bytes. And today we have another wonderful photographer, this time from New Zealand. Before I give you introduction about him, I think it is important to talk about our panelists. So we have Prakash Kumar Singh, who's from Dubai. We have Som, who's from Bangalore, and we have Himadri. Okay, now, and I'm Jasyu Roy. So we are through Extra Bytes, we are trying to create a kind of content where the photography fraternity across the world, which is actually facing a lot of challenges right now, trying to go out and resume, start with their photography all over again. At least when they are sitting home in lockdown, they can refer to these videos and from such wonderful photographers from across the world and get to hone some skills, at least even if it's lockdown, which they can implement later as things open up. And so in the same series, we have today William Patino, who's from New Zealand. And thank you, William, for accepting our invite and joining us on this platform today. And so if I had to give his introduction, I was going through his website and very interesting fact came to light, which is that he is a family man first before a photographer. So, and he announces that very clearly. So he says, first and foremost, I'm a husband and a father, and I think that speaks volumes about somebody who's doing photography. And over the years, he says that he has developed a love and appreciation for the wilderness and the natural environment, something that he took for granted most of his life. And I think there's a learning right in this sentence for all of us, that we take nature for granted. And I think we are realizing now, because of COVID at least, that we should never take nature for granted. And he says that through his work, he doesn't strive to make pretty or popular photos, but attempt to capture and convey the thoughts and emotions that he experiences outdoors and through life in general. And he finds inspiration and hope in an endless pursuit of trying to capture the overwhelming sights, sounds, and sublime presence that is found outdoors. What a wonderful explanation that he has about his work through landscape photography. So welcome again, William. And without speaking too much about anything else, over to you. How about taking us through your journey, why did you take up landscape photography, your challenges that you faced, your inspirations, and how did you get to associate with brands, and maybe take us through your wonderful images, your favorite that you clicked during this journey, beautiful journey being a landscape photographer. Over to you, William.
Thank you. Thanks, guys, for having me on board. I really appreciate it. It's a huge honor and pretty awesome to be speaking with you guys on the other side of the world, essentially. It's quite surreal. Yeah, quite an introduction you've done there as well. You really captured a lot of everything in that. I guess I can start with how I got into photography in the first place, which goes back to around, I think it was late 2011, 2012, early 2012 is when I first picked up a camera and thought that I might like to try and take photos. Essentially, prior to that time, the only creative outlet I had was skateboarding. I grew up skateboarding for a good 10 years, all through my teenage years. And I used to do a lot of video work, filming my friends skating and edit videos together of the skating clips. And as I got older into my early 20s, I wasn't really doing that as much. And there was a trip that my friends were going on, a skateboarding trip, and I wanted to come along to hang out with my friends. And I thought, instead of doing some video stuff, maybe I'll try to take still shots just for something different. I've never really done that before either. And I did that, and I had a really fun time. And I had a friend on that same trip who was a professional photographer. He did like commercial and real estate photography and some sports stuff. And I remember taking one of the photos of my other friend skateboarding. And when I showed my friend who was a photographer the photo that I took, he gave me some good compliments. You know, he's like, "Wow, you've done a really good job there." And I remember how nice it felt to just get that positive feedback. And at that time in my life, in my early 20s, I was going through some mental health struggles, and just getting outdoors, being with my friends, doing something creative, and then getting that positive feedback, it just really made me, you know, feel something positive again, which was really lacking in my life going through depression. So after that trip, I remember going home and I happened to download Instagram, and this is back late 2011. So Instagram was virtually unheard of. And I wasn't on Facebook at the time. I just wasn't on any social media at all. And when I found Instagram, it was just by luck. I was just looking for photography in the App Store, and I happened to stumble across this Instagram platform. And when I downloaded that, I was instantly drawn to the landscape photos I was seeing, and that encouraged me to maybe go and try and capture the landscapes myself. So with that same camera I had at home that I was using to capture my friend skateboarding, I thought I might take this out in the backyard, and just started photographing the sky and the flowers in the garden. Nothing too exciting or anything. And then from there, it just progressed. And I used to live in Australia, so I'm Australian before I moved to New Zealand. And where I lived in Australia, just on the east coast, south of Sydney, we have lots of seascape locations. It's just lots of world-class seascapes, which I didn't know about, obviously. But I remember going down one morning to watch the sunrise with the camera. And that moment I was hooked, just watching the sun come up and trying to photograph it. I just thought, wow, this is the best way to start the day. Just, it's like meditation, going out and just switching off from everything else and just having that quiet time in nature. And then from there, along with sharing my work on social media and finding a community through Instagram, because back in the day, Instagram was a really good community type place to just connect with other people. There was no ads, there was no businesses on there or celebrities or anything. It was just everyone was there kind of growing at the same time. It seemed like there was very few professionals on there. And that really helped me really nurture and grow with my photography. It was quite encouraging to keep sharing the photos I was taking or trying to take, sharing them with people and learning and things like that. So it kind of went from there. And that was probably, it's 8 years ago now. And with the seascape, it was pretty much all seascapes that I was shooting. What I liked about going out with the camera was it made me explore the coast and see areas that I hadn't really seen before. So I grew up with a multitude of amazing seascape locations, but I never even went and seen them before. I didn't even know they existed, even though I virtually grew up right down the road from some of them. So once I had the camera, I loved just driving to a beach, and then I would just start walking, going on the jagged rocks around headlands and just exploring. And for me, that's something that's carried through right to this very day, that love of exploration and being able to just follow that curiosity. I'm always curious about how would this look in person, or how would that place look at this certain time. And yeah, I guess that really started right early on. So I've got a few old photos I can run you guys through if you want me to share some of those.
Yep. My question, I have a question here that you took up photography. What actually was the reason behind picking up photography and suddenly picking up photography? Was something in particular that really prompted you? And what was your support coming from the family?
Yeah, that's a good question. At the time when I first picked up a camera, I was an air conditioning mechanic. So working as a tradesman, just fixing commercial air conditioning. And picking the camera up, there was no motive whatsoever to try and make it a career or anything like that. I guess I don't really know exactly. It was more just to just something to do, something different. And I had the camera at home, and it was really just seeing landscape photos on Instagram, really, that made me go, oh, that looks cool. That looks really nice. And something inside of me just wanted to try it. My mother used to do oil painting, and my grandfather did as well, oil paint landscapes. And I think deep down, I've always had a love for nature, even though I never really went out and explored nature as a child or anything. I remember looking at the landscape paintings, and just always felt like when I looked at that painting, I felt like I was there in that moment. So I feel like maybe when I started using Instagram and just seeing landscape photos, because that was the only time I'd ever seen landscape photography, really. I never found forums or Flickr or anything like that. It was just straight through Instagram. And yeah, it triggered something inside that just said, hey, maybe I should go try that. And when I did try it, as I mentioned, it just felt right to me. It felt like it was something I was meant to do all along. It was like a realization. And because I was going through some mental health battles at the time, the act of going outside and just getting in nature, and when you're looking through the lens at the landscape, you can't really think about anything else, whether it's work, family stuff, problems you might be having, mental health issues. Through the camera, I found that it was like time stood still for that 1 hour. If I went out for a sunrise, maybe 1 hour. It wasn't until I got back to the car and then finished shooting, that's when it was like, okay, I'm back to reality now. So I really found a love for that, just being in the moment, being present in the landscape there. And I just wanted to learn more about photography to do justice to the landscape. So eventually, the more I fell in love with nature and the seas, the ocean, and just what I was experiencing, the more I was determined to get better at photography, because I wasn't satisfied with the results I was getting. I was witnessing such amazing sights. Like just speaking now, I recall so many times going down for sunrise with these big giant sea stacks, Cathedral Rocks, and being the only person there. It's 6 o'clock in the morning, and seeing whales, like humpback whales, a mother and calf, like breaching at the same time as the sun was just blasting down. Just moments like that. And the more you experience those moments, and for me, it was just so humbling and awe-inspiring. I just thought, I just want to be able to capture this and try and show people how amazing it is, essentially. And that just fueled me to keep getting better. And I'm self-taught, so it was a slow journey of just trial and error, essentially. I remember maybe running into someone at the beach one morning, and they would say, oh, try this mode here, put it in AV mode. So I'd do that for a while, and then you'll run into someone else, and you'll just pick up all these little pieces of information, which really didn't help too much in hindsight. So it was a real trial and error type thing, but that's basically what happened. And I really accumulated a lot of time with the camera quite quickly, because I was able to go out every morning and afternoon before the sunrise and go out for sunset, because my work hours were like 8 o'clock to maybe 4:30 or 5. So if I wanted to, I could. And I've got like a addictive personality. When I find something I like, I love to just delve right into it. And with the photography, that's exactly what happened. I just went 100%. I was going out almost every single morning, and just going out regardless of the weather or the light, because I didn't really know much about light or anything. I was just going out anyway and just having fun and exploring. So within a 12-month period, I might have shot 200 sunrises easily. And then the same thing happened the next year, but even more. So in a short amount of time, I was able to really just learn a lot and get a lot of experience. And I think I made this a career at the end of 2014. So it was about 3 years since picking up the camera where I was able to take the plunge and do it full time.
That's wonderful, because you say that you are mostly self-learned photographer, and it could really be daunting and intimidating trying to understand the compositions, and especially seascapes. They are not easy. Finding the spot and the waves could be very daunting as well. And so any kind of any particular photographer or any style you were trying to follow, or that also is the vision that you eventually created through trial and error?
Yeah, another good question. Initially, I can't recall, at least for the first year, of having any direct inspiration. And to be honest, the photos would show that as well. You know, the first year was just very basic type, getting the slow shutter on the water and things like that. I'll have to say it was probably about 12 months into doing photography when I first came across Mark Adamus's work. And I'm sure you're all familiar with Mark's work, Mark Adamus.
Yeah.
When I saw his images, I remember standing, I think I was outdoors, and when I saw them, I just stopped, and I just had to absorb them, and I just couldn't believe what I was looking at. And from that moment on, that was really a turning point for me, because the way that Mark captures the landscape was exactly how I felt about the landscape. It was just that he was doing it much longer, and he was getting the results that in my heart I was striving for. And it's funny because Mark is a friend of mine now. He's a really good friend, and I'm really grateful to know him and have done some trips with him over the years. But back then it was like, I just couldn't believe what I was looking at. It just looked surreal. And it still is this day. Mark is still a huge inspiration of mine, as he is for many people. And I think once I saw his work, that was definitely something that I aspired towards, just particularly just that atmosphere and that emotion that it stirs up within, that evocative style photography. And for me, you read in my bio at the start there, where I mentioned about, you know, I'm not trying to take pretty photos or popular photos. I don't want to just go and get the postcard shot. I'm more invested in trying to convey how I see a place, how I feel about a place, and also what I'm experiencing in life. And because a lot of those years were filled with me learning about myself and mental health and things like that, a lot of it's been showing like a journey from dark into light, always searching for light somewhere. So I guess that always reflected in the work, just darker atmospheric type imagery, I guess. I just love it. I say to people now that I'm a drama queen, you know. I can have fun shooting intimate landscapes, but at heart, I just want to have my heart rate up and be out there humbled by a scene. I just love drama.
That's fantastic. So let's start seeing some of the images. Let's get into
it. No worries. So keep in mind, this is the early stuff. So I get embarrassed when I look at these photos now, but I figure it's good to show people.
It's important.
The real early type imagery. So this range of images here, there's about 6 or 7. This is all around 2012 and 13. And this is the type of coastline that we had. Not that you can see much rock platforms here. I'll just flick to this one quickly. But these were the locations that were within 20-minute, half an hour drive from my house. I'll get back to that one later. I brought up this one because this one was really special. I remember this sunrise was one where I wasn't going to head out with the camera. It was one of those ones where I'd look out the window and think, nah, is it really going to be worthwhile? And I remember going out anyway, and I just was walking, had no idea if this was a location or not. I just parked the car because where I lived in Australia, there was multiple beaches, 20 odd beaches that you could go to, all different in their own right. So I would just park and start walking and go around the headlands and see what the rock platforms were like. And I remember getting out onto this rock shelf here, and the way the ocean would rise up and then surge towards, it was actually, it was quite horrifying. And I still remember standing here. I don't use a tripod now unless it's Astro stuff, but back then I was obviously using the tripod, and remember bracing the tripod as these waves were coming, and the heart rate was just going crazy. And I was thinking to myself, what am I doing out here? And then just as the sun popped up, it just all made perfect sense. It just felt like, wow, this is what it's all about. When you doubt and think that you can't do something, there's not going to be something out there. I was proven wrong and just really humbled. And the look of this photo here, just that dark and moody type imagery, is something. This is one of the first times where I felt like, cool. I've done something here that's not that just pretty postcard sunset type photo. It was something a little bit more. And this one is probably late 2012, early 2013. This is basically 10 minutes from where I lived in Wollongong, south of Sydney. And the lighthouse is one of the icons in the town. And I remember thinking to myself, I always pre-visualize photos that I'd like to take. I always try and come up with ideas and things to aspire towards. That's just what I've always done. And I remember saying, I think it was to my wife, saying one time, I'd love to get a lightning photo next to the lighthouse. I just thought it would be so cool to be able to capture that. And sure enough, it probably wasn't too long after that conversation, a storm came through. And I'd never photographed lightning before. And this was the first time going out. And I remember just running out here and just doing 30-second exposures. And it was quite fortunate there because the storms, the weather moves from the west out to the east. And this is obviously right on the coast. So you could position yourself very easily with the storms as they would pass overhead and then go out to the ocean. And I remember photographing this one. And when I finally captured it, just going back to the car and being so I just shocked, like I did it. I actually got this shot that I never thought I would capture. And it was funny because I actually got a little greedy. I was in the car and the storm was then moving out to the ocean. And I thought to myself, well, okay, I've got the lighthouse shot, but why should I go home? It's still going off over the ocean. Maybe I'll go get some more images. So I went down and I was knee deep in the rocks where the waves are rushing in and out. And it was basically stars with then storm cloud below with some lightning coming down. And anyway, a wave came through, or many waves came through. And eventually I realized I had my car keys and phone in my pocket and both just disappeared eventually from a wave. And I spent 2 hours looking for them, had to find a headlamp off a fisherman. And I ended up finding them. They're in a pothole in the rocks. And I just thought to myself, you shouldn't have got greedy. You should have just went home when I got the shot I was after. And believe it or not, I made that mistake twice. Exact same scenario, going in the ocean with pockets full of phone and keys and losing them. It wasn't a good feeling. So it was a bittersweet evening where I was able to capture this image that I was really happy with at the time, and then losing the keys. And yeah, I still remember.
But did you capture any images over there?
I did, yeah, but it's just not in the portfolio anymore. And it was on Instagram once upon a time. It looked interesting. It had the stars cloud with a fork of lightning, but the foreground was just all messy, long exposure.
At least you got a shot.
Yeah, I did. At least I got something at the time, eh?
Cool.
This is typical of the type of stuff that I'd photograph, just these types of rock shelves and things like that. This sunrise, I think, was New Year's Day 2013.
Wow.
And it was just one of those ones where it's just insane. The colors, if you took an iPhone photo of it, the color or all the dynamic range would explode. It just wouldn't be able to handle it. It was, to this very day, one of the most vibrant sunrises I'd ever seen. And it was around this time that I started learning about what can make a good sunrise or sunset, learning about the different clouds, the altitude of certain clouds, and then, of course, looking for that gap on the horizon. You can see this little gap here where the sun was able to break through and spread the light. But a lot of these early images were just basically plonking down the tripod and just doing, 1 to 2 second exposure type things. This location, Cathedral Rocks, this is really one of my favorite places to shoot. And this image, along with this one, were captured on the same night. And this one in particular here, I'll go to the cave one in a minute. But I had a discussion with a friend back in 2013, and he was into photography as well. And he asked me a question. He said, "Oh, what's one photo you'd love to capture in your lifetime? What's something you'd really like to get?" And Cathedral Rocks, this location, is somewhere where I'd go for so many sunrises, and I started running little workshops here, local workshops. It was just a place that was really special to me. And I said to him, you know what, I think I'd love to just get a lightning bolt photo at this place. It's just the type of location that would suit a storm image. And I said to him, I remember specifically saying, look, I think I'll get it, but it might take 10 years, but I really believe I'll get it one day. And it must have been about 6 months later that we had 5 days straight of lightning storms coming through the area. And the first day I went down here, and I tried previously as well, so it was probably the 5th attempt at getting this shot. And yeah, the second day of this big storm period, I came down and I was sitting here under the umbrella. It was right on sunset around this time, so it was getting quite dark by this stage. And I was monitoring this storm using a radar, watching the lightning bolts slowly moving from west to east. And this is a 50 millimeter shot, because if I used a 16 mil, which would be more common, you could easily pick up the lightning, but the composition wouldn't be as strong in the size of this rock here. So I really just had that small portion of sky, and I just had this quiet confidence thinking to myself, just be patient, just be patient, just like the lighthouse one as well. Sometimes you just get that intuition, like this is going to work, it's going to be okay. And it started raining. The storm was getting pretty wild, and I started to doubt. And then during one of the 30-second exposures, this bolt just went bang, perfectly right behind the rock there. And I remember the exposure was still happening, and I started to shake. I was getting nervous, you know, with excitement, and also thinking, did I actually capture that? And I'll never forget just seeing that image on the back of the camera. And I actually cried. I just cried because, you know, it was just so humbling to be there in the moment, but to also think of this shot, something that is quite rare, obviously, to have it in your head months prior, and then now you're looking at it, it's actually materialized. It's a really powerful thing with art to be able to pre-visualize something and then manifest it and see it come to life. And before I packed up, it was at 50 mil, so I quickly focused here. So it's a focus stack, but otherwise it's just 2 exposures, one for the background and everything, and then one in the front here. And from there, it was raining and heavy, and the storm was right above me, obviously. So I ran inside the cave here. The cave is obviously just a few meters away, and I got inside the cave, and it was very dark. You could barely see your hand in front of your face by this stage. And I thought, hang on, I might as well keep shooting. You know, I initially ran in there just for safety, just to hide. And I thought, I might as well get the camera out. So I started shooting, and then sure enough, I've got about 5 or 6 different frames with lightning in the cave here. So it was a productive night.
This is interesting, yeah.
This one was hard though, because the cave is so dark. I was trying various techniques to get the exposure right, because obviously you're shooting a backlit environment, and then you have the highlights with the lightning. This one here is a single exposure. It's ISO 3200, 30 seconds from memory, and f4, and then that was it. If I was to do this image now, I would bulb expose all the interior here and the rock. So I would maybe do a 4-minute exposure at ISO 200, for example. And that way there'd be a lot less noise, because there's quite a lot of noise in this one. And then you could just blend in the exposure that you captured for the sky, just leaving the tripod in the same place. And then that way you just have an image that can be printed if you want to print it large.
Which year did you take this? You said that you started in 2012. Am I right?
Yeah, so this was taken 2014, this one was.
This one 2014. So I have another thought in my mind, if you could answer that.
Yeah.
When is that you started realizing that post-processing is important in landscape photography?
Initially, when I first started, I didn't want to get into the Photoshop or anything. I was like, no way, I don't want to do that. I just want to be outside with the camera. I'm sure you guys could probably relate to that to some degree. You think, I don't want to be on the computer, I just want to be outside. And it was my friend, that friend I told you about earlier, the commercial photographer, eventually, because it was probably maybe, must have been 9 months into the photography. So it's probably late 2012. When I showed my friend some of my landscape images, and I said I wanted to maybe build a website to sell prints. And he said, come around mine and we'll put the images on the big screen, and you'll have a look with me and talk about designing a logo for the website, etc. And at the time, I was only processing on a laptop, which was not a Mac. It was some random laptop, just a PC-based Windows platform. And what I was using to process was something called paint.net. It was a free editing program. I wasn't even shooting RAW. It was just JPEG. And anyway, when I took the files around to my friend's house, we put them on his big screen, and my heart, I was just so embarrassed because how they looked on the laptop, to me, they looked good. And then we got them on his calibrated monitor, and they just looked so bad. They were so saturated. Half of them were actually out of focus. I didn't even realize that the lens I had at the time, I bought it off eBay, and it was actually broken. And anyway, what it did, it made me realize, and talking with my friend, he basically said, look, if you want to get serious about the photography and have a more professional look, you really need to use Photoshop, because he was looking at the compression in these files, these JPEGs as well. And I thought, okay, yeah. I was like, bummer, what a shame, but okay, I understand. And basically, I just, because I took it so seriously, because like I said at the start, I wanted to do justice to what I was seeing and capturing, I instantly just purchased Photoshop and just got stuck into it and just taught myself. And yeah, it seems very daunting when I reflect back on it. And I remember opening it up and looking at it and just closing it, because it looked so confusing. I thought, what is this? But slowly, piece by piece, I was able to get there. So it must have been probably 2013 is where, late 2012 is where I got into Photoshop. But it maybe wasn't until, to be honest, 2014, probably around this stage, maybe even a little bit later, where I really went, hang on, you can really refine the look of the images here the more you know and understand about the technology. And I guess I was afraid of admitting that I needed to use Photoshop because there's that stigma attached to editing photos, especially back then when you're learning. I just didn't want people to think what I was doing was fake. It hurt my feelings if I chased down a storm like this and then I showed someone and they said it was fake. So I feel like I was reluctant to dive into Photoshop because I didn't want to attach my work to, I don't know, I can't quite grasp the mindset there, but eventually I realized, wow, if I put more time into this, the results are looking much better. It's actually looking more realistic and doing justice to the images. And then I just started taking it seriously and just refining my workflow and the way I do everything.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right, mate. You go.
Okay. No, I mean, specifically because having seen your work and knowing you do like to chase strong atmospheres or wild atmospheres, as I put it, right? And it's evident right from your starting years. You've been chasing lightning and precarious conditions, right? I don't know what's in it too. But any tips for shooting lightning? Because nobody really talks about it, but you do have to take a lot of precautions. So could you share some with us?
Yeah, no problem. And I must admit, and thank you, by the way. And I must admit, I miss chasing lightning in New Zealand here. We don't really get the same storms that you get in Australia. It's so dangerous. And when I look back at this photo and how close I was standing to this huge steel conductor, which is going to attract, it's just crazy, some of the stuff I was doing. As far as the safety goes, over the years, if I really felt like the storm was directly above me, then I would stay sheltered in the car, just not out directly below it. Once I could tell the main bolts were now beyond me, which is pretty obvious. You can just tell when they're no longer above you, but off to the side. That's when I found it safe enough to head out. And I'd always let someone know where I was going as well. As far as the photography is concerned, I prefer to shoot lightning in the darker environment because, one, the light, it casts the luminosity on the other parts of the landscape. So you can see in the water here, it's got that nice luminous glow from the bolt. And on this one as well, not so much from the lightning, but obviously just glow on the water from surrounding lights. When you take a lightning photo in the afternoon, when it's still bright, you need to use a lightning trigger, which I don't have, and that will pick up the bolt and photograph it for you, but it just doesn't look the same. So because I'm shooting my lightning scenes in a darker environment, it's just a matter of doing long exposures. And of course it's hard because you don't want to overexpose the lightning. Generally, I'm keeping the ISO low most of the time. This one here, the ISO was off memory 250. And then this one here, the ISO was 200. You just need to be confident and know that the bolt will be bright enough to, it won't be underexposed basically. So this one was a 30-second exposure at f4 at ISO 200. And that's basically the result there on a Canon 5D Mark II. And this one here, f10, ISO 200, I believe, or 250. And 30 seconds as well. And I'm pretty much getting those results most of the time. This one here was the only exception where I said it was ISO 3200. And that was mainly just to try and show some of the shadow detail in the cave. And you can see that the lightning didn't even overexpose. I would have pulled down the highlights a little bit, but otherwise it's okay. So really my advice would be just let the camera expose as long as needed, 30 seconds, even 1 minute, go 2 minutes. Keep the ISO low, and obviously the f-stop is going to be the issue, just helping the camera actually get that bright enough exposure. So you can always focus stack if you had to, which like I said, that's what I did on this one here. But otherwise, that's all I say is just long exposure, keep that ISO low, open up the aperture so you're going to help the camera see. If you capture one and obviously you can tell it's overexposed, then you'll need to make some adjustments. Maybe close the f-stop down instead of f4. Maybe go to 5.6, f7. Every case will be different. The main thing that will determine the brightness of the bolt is the proximity of the lightning bolt to you. So obviously if it's very, very close, it's just going to completely explode and white everything out, which has happened to me in the past where it was just so close that it blew out. And in that case, it's just going to overexpose almost no matter what you do. You can't really get around that. But most of these storms here, the ones that are safest to photograph, they're a little bit away. It's still, obviously, there's an element of danger involved. But, you know, this here where this bolt is hitting, that's probably about 1 kilometre away. And same as this other one here, this is moving out to the ocean about 1 kilometre away, roughly. This one here is closer. But yeah, there's definitely trial and error involved. And unfortunately, you can't just set up and shoot, check. You're really just waiting for the bolts to strike, and you might only get one, obviously. But that would be my starting point. Just keep the ISO a little bit lower, just so you don't overexpose that bolt there, essentially. The other thing as well, there's lightning tracker apps. I used to use one. I think it was called Lightning Tracker, and it showed a map, and in real time was showing where the bolts were striking. So it made it quite easy to watch them move along. And then you could plan, okay, it's coming this way. I'm going to head that direction now and try and get a shot. My last bit of advice would be to still create a strong composition. It's very tempting. And same as if you're photographing the Milky Way or the Northern Lights, because such amazing things are happening in the sky, just like the lightning, most people, the inclination is to put on a wide angle lens and just tilt up and take a photo that is 80% sky, and then just have the foreground down the bottom. I've always taught people, and for myself, stuck to the same rule. I'm going to frame this up as if it was a sunrise or sunset. I still want to have those basic rules of composition, leading lines, pulling the eye through the scene, just as if it was a sunrise or sunset. The only difference now, I'm going to have a lightning bolt in the sky, or maybe it's the Northern Lights, whatever it is. There's no need to throw all the rules out the window just for the sake of capturing something in the sky. So sometimes I'll say, if it's a workshop client, for example, maybe they're shooting the aurora and they're, you know, of course, the first time you just want to fire a few and get it on the camera. But eventually I'll say, would you compose it like that if it was a sunrise? And they'd be like, oh, no, I'd look for the leading line here and I'd get the waterfall in. I'm like, well, let's do that now. And then we'll get the nice aurora up there. We don't just have to do a sky photo. So that's what I've tried to obviously do with these ones here as well. Just stick to that same type of framing. And of course, it makes it more difficult, especially if you're trying to capture a lightning bolt, because you're eliminating so much of the sky. And I remember this moment here, there was bolts going off to the right, to the left. And I just had to stand the ground and say, it'll be worth it. Just got to keep waiting.
And you do not use any actions panel, I just noticed. So do you hand blend?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit different. I'm a bit different in my approach to shooting and processing. Yeah, like I said, I don't use a tripod. Obviously, lightning or an aurora, I will, but I don't shoot the aurora except once a year when I go to Iceland. So the last time I used a tripod for out in the field was probably 3 years ago now. And when it comes to the processing, years back when I first got into it, I was using Nick software and things like that. And I eventually got to a point where I thought, I don't want to rely on an automated way of creating an effect on my photos. I thought of it like, say, painting. If I was a painter, I wouldn't give a robot the brush and sit back and let the robot do the stroke. I want to be knowing how to achieve myself every single result. And look, that's not a judgment on anyone that wants to use any panels or anything like that, of course. It's just for me, I liked having that full control and just knowing if I wanted to do this, I know how to do it myself and not just magically pushing a button and hope it works. So all I'd use is I use Camera Raw. I just use Photoshop and Camera Raw. I pretty much do 90% of the imagery processing, sorry. And then for blending, mainly, yeah, it's just by hand. If it's a focus stack, I'll use the auto align, auto blend, obviously, for something like that. But even sometimes I'll manually blend as well if I need to. So I don't use any actions for luminosity. And I did in the past, I used actions for luminosity masks, but now I just don't even use luminosity masks. I can't remember the last time. It's probably 3 years since I've done a luminosity mask or anything complicated. And all my images, these are just JPEGs, but if I pulled up a PSD file, there's only one layer. I don't like building layers up, and I very rarely will have more than 2 or 3 at the most. And if I'm confident in the result, I'll just flatten the image. I just don't want to have a huge file size and a huge lineup of all these layers. I just am confident in what I'm doing. I let it sit there. Once I like the look, I'll flatten it, and then I'll just keep working on top. And I don't know, that's just the method that I use. And most of my work is really essentially dodging and burning, but using an adjustment brush and just bringing up different tones via that method, really. I don't know how I really got down that road of doing things that way. I think once I started using the adjustment brush, I was like, wow, this feels really organic to me. It feels quite natural, and I'm able to just get the results I'm after. And yeah, that's kind of how I do things now. And it's quite beneficial for me being a workshop host because it's very easy to teach as well. I don't have to tell people, okay, if you want to learn my processing, you need to now install this and buy that thing, and here's a bunch of actions. It's just like, okay, do you have Photoshop? Cool. I'll sit you down and I'll show you how to use a brush here, and we can kind of create whatever we want to do with the light and the tones and everything.
Thank you.
I've got one more old one here. This is just a random, a surf break. Used to go here and photograph these waves. Now, of course, they don't always do this. My friend was out bodyboarding near this wave at the time. And what this is, it's the result of swell coming back, colliding with the wave that's about to break. And as they two collide, it's created that explosion right there. And I remember I had about 2 seconds. I could see it about to happen. I saw the swell coming back and then the incoming swell. And I thought, oh, hang on. And yeah, just the structure that it made here. And I've been to this location multiple times, many times. It's very popular with photographers, surf photographers. And I've never been able to replicate anything like that again. And yeah, this is very old now, and I don't really like the image at all and the look of it. But it's one of those ones that, for some reason, obviously people seem to like it, and it's quite different. But yeah, just one of those moments where I was like, oh, I won't ever see that type of thing again.
It has a pattern to it, so I think that's why people like it. And so you anticipate these kinds of action that.
Yeah, well, basically what this is here is there's a wave breaks here in the right conditions with a big swell. Basically, a wave's generated from a reef. So when the swell is big enough, just this location here, there's a wave that just seems to generate, and it's just a normal looking wave, a really big, heavy wave. But this one in particular was when the swell was coming back from the headland and then hitting this incoming one at the same time. And yeah, there was just a 2 to 3 second window where I was waiting for the incoming wave, and then I saw the wave coming from the opposite direction, and I thought, oh, this is about to do something here. And then, yeah, that's when it's just exploded outward. And I've seen it do that many times, like colliding. It's just called a backwash, but not in that perfect pattern with the right light and everything like that. So yeah, it's kind of one that I still keep in the portfolio just because it was such a rare moment to look back on. So yeah, that's a bit of a run through of.
But yeah, go back to the same image.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on a lighter note, a funny thought came into my mind that do you always look for these explosions either in the sky or in the sea? What is happening? Action landscape. So they're not quite. Something is happening. Action is happening in landscape.
Yeah, good point. Yes, I do, mate. I told you I'm a drama queen, and I'm just drawn to, like, to be honest, if you take me, I've been to so many places where there's the mountain, a crystal clear, perfect reflection, and it's pink sky, and I just can't do it. I can't take the photo of the reflection. It just doesn't, it's too still and calm. I need to be getting my heart rate up somewhere, and I don't know, it's just adrenaline. I want to feel alive in the moment. And for me, the calm scenes where it's very serene and pretty, not most of the time I can stand there and look at it, and I'll get maybe my clients to shoot it. And for me, I'm just like, nah, I'm not feeling it inside. But when I put myself in a scenario where maybe there's wind or rain or the lightning, whatever it is, now I'm having fun. I'm really drawn to the action side of what nature provides. And yeah, it's something that to this very day, and to be honest, it's annoying because these moments are so rare to get that evocative, dramatic type scenery with storms and those conditions. It's a lot harder than just getting a nice reflection down the lake or, whatever it may be, just a nice waterfall somewhere or something like that. But for me, I feel like I'm just not, and you guys will relate to this, you're trying to fulfill something within. And I don't feel like I'm being fulfilled or true to myself when I photograph something that doesn't stir me up and move me inside. And of course, every now and then I will find one of those scenarios like a waterfall or something that is not very dramatic. And that's because it did move me. But 9 times out of 10, the thing that makes me want to create a photo is something that it humbles me, and it makes me just go, wow, this is getting a little bit dangerous, or, the heart rate's up here. And that's what was fun about the seascapes, was a lot of it was the heart rate was up. And there's a YouTube video of me, my wife just happened to film it, this is years back, at this location, getting completely knocked over. I was submerged under the water here because where I'm standing here, it's going up above the knees, and, eventually you just end up getting hit. And yeah, thankfully I never got struck by lightning or anything, but I always feel like just a little bit closer, get a little bit closer, a little bit lower, a little bit, and eventually, yeah, you do end up destroying a camera or falling over or just running, whatever it is. But yeah, I really enjoy that. And I said that I skateboarded all through my teenage years, and skateboarding's, a bit extreme, jumping around and jumping downstairs and things like that. And maybe I've just always enjoyed just getting the heart rate up, and I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is, but I really enjoy it. And I'm thankful, and where I live now in Fiordland down here in New Zealand, we get a lot of rain and storms here, not lightning, but just big storms, weather systems. And I'm always able to get out. I love being in the rain. So many of my images are made in the rain, or at least going out with the camera, just out, getting completely drenched, standing in the raging rivers. So I'm always able to I don't have the waves like I used to, not close by, but I'm able to get out and be below the mountains with the towering waterfalls and everything like that. It's really fun. It's just fun, to be honest. And for me, this is how I find my fun. Other people will find it obviously in different ways. And that's the beauty of the art in photography and all arts, is how we all resonate with different things, different scenery, different methods of art, whatever it may be, just creatives in general. It's all subjective, and this just happens to be what I like to do. Yeah, it's good fun.
So, Will, do you believe that for any artist, their work reflects who they are? And you associated this journey with your skateboarding days as well, right? The sense of adventure and the adrenaline rush. Is that who you are?
Yeah, no, I believe that the art we create, or whether you call it art or not, whatever we call it, it's definitely a reflection of something within that person. Whether you're a chef, a painter, a musician, right. It's an outlet. You're getting something out from inside of you. And I don't believe I'm not an adrenaline junkie, or it's not, and I'm not a very outward person or extroverted. I'm quite withdrawn to myself most of the time. And I think with what I'm trying to convey, I'm a spiritual guy, and I'm drawn, I feel like I'm out in creation here. And when I'm in these moments where I'm being humbled and just left, just in reverence, they're the ones I'm chasing, because I feel like I'm drawing closer to something beyond myself, something bigger than us all. And whether you believe in a creator or even just naturalism, it's still bigger than us all, nature in general. So I'm always seeking those moments that clearly demonstrate how small I am and how big, vast, and beautiful creation is, nature is. And I guess for me, that is best demonstrated in moments that are dramatic, essentially. I think that makes sense, hopefully.
Absolutely. Very poignant. Very poignant. There's a poet in you, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. It's and when I talk about it now and look at the old images here, and I can feel it inside of me. I want to be out there now. I just love it so much. And it's hard because it's so reliant on the weather. We got out of lockdown here, the strict lockdown, about 2 weeks ago. And I was like, awesome, I can go and shoot if I want to. And I just look at the weather and I'm like, it's not going to meet me halfway. I still need the weather to do something that I can go and photograph. The landscape's still there, but I need the weather to come in and then stir it all together. And that's hard sometimes, because you want to create, and I have that burning desire. And like I said, I talk about it now and I can feel it. I just want to be out there. And so sometimes it's hard, because you're like, man, these moments with lightning and whatever it may be, it's not always there. Unlike a painter, where an artist can just start to paint it and that's their outlet. Photography is so different, because we're really landscape photography. We're so reliant on nature. And for me, with the processing, I'm not opposed to replacing a sky, for example, but I wouldn't do that with a lightning shot. When it comes to lightning, rainbows, things like that, I've got to be in the moment. I've got to capture that legitimately at that location. Otherwise, I just wouldn't feel like it was, the real. I'd cheat myself, and I wouldn't hesitate to replace a sky. Let's say if this sky here was, it had a different type of cloud and color tone, then I feel like that is not taking away from, the whole point of this shot is this wave. And if I replace the background, and this is just a single exposure, but just for argument's sake, but when it comes to the more dramatic stuff, I want to be there feeling it. It's not the same if I'm not. And yeah, that's hard, because sometimes nature just doesn't display us with these beautiful things. It's quite rare. So I'm I'm always watching the weather, probably 10 times a day, always keeping an eye on things. And my wife is very supportive, and she always has been. We didn't have kids when I picked up the camera, and once I got into photography, and now it's a career, like I've just changed as a person so much over the years, and for the better, I hope and believe. But there's been a lot of sacrifices that come with chasing, whether it's the lightning, just taking off, saying, I really need to go right now. And I remember this shot here, my son was just a few months old, and going out to get this one, and this is not far from where I used to live, but just being there thinking, oh, should I really be doing this stuff now? You know, now I'm a father, and yeah, so there's a lot of sacrifices. And just last week, I went and got a shot here in New Zealand, and it was an 8-hour drive. Probably a bit more than 8 hours. It was the third time I tried to get this shot. So it's, you know, you're driving over 1,000 kilometers just to try and get this one image. I've been thinking about for 12 months. And so I'm leaving my wife and my kids, and I said, all right, I'm going to go get this shot, you know, and try and get it this time. I'll be away for probably 5-6 days, try to be there for this weather window. And yeah, it's sometimes it doesn't pay off all the time, you know. Sometimes you come home empty-handed, and probably most of the time you come home empty-handed. Thankfully, this one that I'm talking about last week, finally I managed to capture what I've been trying to do for quite a while. But yeah, there's a lot of sacrifices. And I say to people, if you want to get into photography, landscape photography, you really need to have a love for nature and just being at that place, regardless of whether you get a photo or not, because that's what's going to happen a lot of the time. Sure, you can go there and take a photo, but are you going to get one that you're truly happy with? Probably not. And if you're not content in doing that, then you won't last. And I've seen so many people come and go. And the rise of social media and Instagram definitely allures a lot of people in with the attraction of getting followers and things. But if you don't have that true love for nature and being out there, then you can only do it for so long, and you get over it, because you realize pretty quick that, hang on, this is not as easy as it looks. And thankfully for me, the love of being in the moment and at the locations and exploring, that is greater than the image making now. And it wasn't when I first picked up a camera, but the camera led me into nature and then made me realize, hang on, you know, this is very important, and this is a place that makes me better. And it really, yeah, it's really helped me a lot in my walk in life. And now I can easily just go out without the camera and just sit there and watch these things. And yeah, of course, when something very rare happens, you think, oh man, I need the camera now, or I want to capture it. I want to try and, you know, work with it here. But most of the time I'm quite content to go and camp and go out with the family and just watch these things. Maybe it's an awesome sunrise or sunset. I remember when I first got into photography, if one of these sunrises happened and I didn't capture it, I was grumpy for half of the day, because where I lived, I could go to the kitchen window and look out the window an hour before the sunrise, and you could get an indication of if there would be a good sunrise or not. And I developed a habit of waking up every morning for probably 4 years straight, every morning, an hour before sunrise, maybe just over an hour. And I walk to the kitchen window and I would look outside and just check the structure. Is there a gap on the horizon? Is there any clouds at all? And if it looked promising, I would head out. And then every now and then you would think, nah, it's not going to do anything. It's too blocked on the horizon. You go back to bed. And then every now and then you would wake up later and the walls are glowing in the house, and you open a curtain and it's just red. And I'd just be so devastated, like, oh, I missed it. You know, I could have been capturing that. But then over time, I was like, it doesn't matter. It's and now I could go out and just watch this stuff and just think, this is beautiful. And I couldn't do that at first. And especially before picking up a camera, I probably watched 2 sunrises in my life. But photography really helped me see the value in nature and being out in the environment.
That's fantastic. I think
I can share some new stuff now, because I don't like looking at all the old ones.
Yes,
please.
waiting for those.
All right, I'll just bear with me and I'll pull up the newer stuff. Yeah, it's funny when you look back on your old work, and I've obviously deleted a lot over the years, and you trim down the portfolio and whatnot, but some of them I find it's important just to keep there for memento, you know, for the memories at least.
I have been like chasing lightning for like quite a long time now, like since 2011. So even if your images are old, I'm totally in love with them, man.
Oh, thank you, man. It's yeah, it's a hard one. It just depends on what that specific storm is doing at the time, and yeah, you got to be patient. That's for sure.
So, Will, while you bring them up, I wanted to specifically ask you about the south of Fiordland in New Zealand. I think you and Mark probably went there. The Green Islets.
Yeah, on the coast in New Zealand. Yeah. So I eventually got to meet Mark when I moved to New Zealand. I was fortunate that Mark started following my photography probably around that 2014 period, and we just kind of kept in touch a little bit. And when I moved to New Zealand, I think I let him know that I was moving over here, and he happened to be coming over for a trip. So we met up and we spent a good week and a half scouting, and we've probably done about 6 or 7 things together now here in New Zealand. But yeah, one of the times was going right down, where I live, Fiordland National Park is 99% wilderness. There's no trails, there's very few walking trails. It's just very rugged and remote, and particularly the coastline. And I've got that photo. I'll share that photo, actually, the one that you're talking about. But yeah, there's a lot of exploring that can be done here. And unfortunately, it is so remote here that a helicopter is almost needed most of the time. And that's incredibly expensive. You're paying at least $3,000, $4,000 if you want to get flown somewhere and dropped off and then get picked up again the next day or a few days later. So it's tricky. If you want to do things on foot, which is actually preferable because you get to connect with nature more, it's just either impossible or you need a 20-day window to try and get to these spots and then get back again. It's just insane. That's the beauty of here, though, is how untouched it all is. And all of New Zealand, not just Fiordland, there's a lot of wilderness. I'll pull up some of the newer images now. Here we go. So this is just a variety of different works. So this is Fiordland. This one here is typical Fiordland, really, where we have forest, bush, really thick, scrubby bush, and then you have the snow-capped glaciated peaks. Getting to this spot here, and it's not my favorite image, to be honest, but it was just the memory behind it, going with my friend off trail, trying to get to this cascade that I could see on the map. I could see, hey, there's going to be a stream here that's going to line up with these peaks. I think it could make a good photo. We went up to this area and we were literally probably only half a kilometer from the stream, and we had about an hour till sunset. And that final half a kilometer was an absolute, just typical Fiordland scrub, where we were going along these boulders and pushing through these type of thick bush, and I fell down. We both fell down so many times, just plummeted between these huge boulders like what you see here on the left, because the scrub just covers it all up and you can't see where things are dropping. And we've managed to get here with maybe 15 minutes to spare, and then all this fog rolled in, and just after sunset, as the temperature dropped, the fog just filled up. It's in a big hanging valley, this area, and it just filled the entire area. And then we had to go back in the dark to where we left our bags for camp. Getting back to the camp was just an absolute nightmare because we lost all visibility with the fog, and we had to bush bash again, and we had no idea which way we came in because there's no trail. But to finally do it all, and obviously we got back and everything was good. To me, that is the funnest type of photography, where you have a preconceived idea of getting the shot and then you try and execute it. There's a few hurdles along the way, and you might get the image if you're lucky, and then you get home to tell the tale. That's really fun to me, to be able to do that. And just this photo here in this location, I just haven't really seen a photograph of it all before. And that's what I really like to do, is to go into places and just create something fresh. That exploring side was there from day one when I first started shooting the seascapes in Australia. I just loved, and back then, 2011 and 12, the seascapes in where I lived, there was just no photos of them. I didn't even know what to look up. There was just nothing. So when I would just start walking to these beaches and headlands and then find these spires and rock structures and shelves, it was just so exciting. It was like, wow, look at this thing. This is great. And that's that, I guess, that excitement that I still carry today. And not so much adrenaline, but I love, it's like an itch. You got to scratch the itch. If I feel like there could be potential somewhere to make something unique, curiosity gets the better of me and you have to go and pursue it. This one here is aerial image. I do a lot of aerial work here in New Zealand. Again, because Fiordland is so remote, or just South Island in general, the mountain areas is so vast. And I realized a few years back from the air how you can really portray a different mood and tell a different story about the landscape here and convey it in ways that just aren't possible unless you're from the air, such as a shot like this. Fiordland is full of these steep glaciated valleys, but when you're down on the ground, all you can see is the valley before you, and then that's all. It's not until maybe you're on the ocean on the coast and you can have a look, or you get above and you can realize how the glacier over time has shaped it all and created such a wonderful place. So this is a compressed telephoto shot off memory. It might be about 300 mil, maybe 400 mil, and just showing that layering of the mountains. So when I do aerial work, I don't own a drone. Number one, you can't use drones here anyway, but I've never really been drawn to using a drone for myself, just because I want to see with my own eyes what I'm capturing before I take it. I don't want a piece of technology to get the glory while I sit on, in the car park or something like that. So for me, drones they just didn't really fulfill that creative desire inside. So often 90% of my aerials are from a small plane and the window can pop out. So that's this shot here. And I've got a good rapport with the pilots that I use locally as well. So it's been pretty cool to just be flexible and work together, send a text and say, hey, something's happening with the light. Are you available this afternoon? And going up. And the same thing though, there's a lot of failed attempts that come along with the aerials. You can go up there and then the light just doesn't quite do what you expected, or maybe a cloud comes in and blocks the light altogether. But I've learned, because I've done so many aerial shoots now, and learning about the weather and what happens in Fiordland in particular, just learning the right conditions, the sun alignment, what season, how much humidity is in the air, all those little things come together. And of course, sometimes you just get lucky, but over the years, it's gotten to a point where it's getting a bit more finely tuned about, when I want to go up and what I'm trying to achieve anyway.
That was crazy. The shot.
Yeah, thanks. Been trying to capture this type of image for a few years. The name for Fiordland, the translation in the Maori language is Arafenawa, which means Shadowland. And when I heard that name and that translation, Shadowland, I just thought, man, that's a cool name, and I want to try and convey that in an image. And this was basically the image that I was going for. I've tried to get this layered image for so long, and I've got variations of it, but not quite to this extent where it showed so many definitive separate ridge lines and just getting the right haze and atmosphere through there as well. And this is more of a recent one, just from January. So pretty rewarding to be up there in the air and just be looking at it, just going, just there it is, and you get like a 5-minute window where the sun just gets low enough on that right angle to beam down the valleys and light up the haze in the sky, and then it's all over. And yeah, a lot of adrenaline involved, of course, when you got the window open in the plane and hanging out in the wind, and good fun. I've put this one in here, just something different. I'm not a big astrophotography guy, and the only time, as I mentioned earlier, that I really do astro is if I go to Iceland. I generally go to Iceland once per year to run some workshops over there. And that's the only time I really use the tripod for the last few years, dust the tripod off. And you'd know this location at Vestrahorn. And I think this was maybe 2 years ago now, maybe, I don't know, a year. I can't remember. But we went here with the guys for sunrise, and I noticed all the ice on the foreshore, which it doesn't happen often at this location. This is the first time I'd ever seen ice on the foreshore. And I said to the guys, I said to my friend who was assisting me in the workshop, I was like, this has to be an aurora shot. We need to come back tonight. I'm not going to tell the workshop guys because I don't like, especially with the aurora. I've learnt you don't tell people, yeah, we're going to shoot the aurora tonight. You just don't ever say that because you can get shut down, especially in Iceland where the cloud can come in and ruin everything. But I was quietly confident with the forecast and everything like that. I thought there's a good potential here. And I said to my mate, just imagine that green glow across this ice. And I was just like, it's going to happen, and got to the afternoon and it was in the blue hour, and I brought the guys around, crystal clear sky, and we're all able to just get out on the ice here, and everyone could pick a foreground to work with. And I think this is today, still to this day, after 8 trips to Iceland, this is the only time I've been able to go to a location after sunset. It's blue hour, you can set your composition up, and then you can just sit back, watch it get dark, and then the aurora just appears like exactly where you're pointing. This is the only time. Most often you'll maybe do a sunset somewhere and then the cloud comes in and then you're chasing the clear skies, and then you might find it somewhere if you're lucky. Pretty rare to be able to just set up and everyone can just shoot during the blue hour. And then the aurora was appearing here on the right-hand side of the mountain still while the sunset glow was dim behind us. It was just insane. And we just sat here for a good 2 hours. And it wasn't until I got home that I realized there must have been a meteor shower happening at the time, because this is the sky. This is a focus stacked image, and it was all shot same place in the same probably 10-minute window. So I'm just focus stacking using f4. Had a 2.8 lens, but I used f4 just for a little bit more depth of field. Focusing on the foreground here for 3 minutes, 3-minute exposure, ISO 500, and then focusing in the midground, and then one more for the background. So that's to get all that depth of field at a low ISO, so there's no noise or very little noise, and then it's sharp from front to back. And then the sky, of course, is just a single. This is a 10-second exposure at f2.8, I think ISO 2000 or 3200, something like that. And yeah, I didn't realize until I got home that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meteors just shooting around here. I don't really recall seeing any that night. I maybe saw one. So there must have been something happening on that occasion. But yeah, very rewarding to be able to come here and everyone just laughing as we watch the aurora dance away. It's quite to this day, I say to people, it's the one thing I really recommend you try and witness in your lifetime if you're able to have that opportunity, because it truly is spectacular. And of course, every night, or not just every night, but every display is different. And sometimes people will go to Iceland and they might see it once and it was a really weak display and they say, oh, it's all photoshopped, it doesn't really look like this. But I've seen it so many times now that every now and then you just get one of those real big flare-ups where it is just so bright and moving so quick that you don't even want to take photos. You just want to laugh and watch it. It's just truly incredible. Doesn't matter how many times you see it. It's very humbling. It's quite surreal, particularly, because we don't live that far north. It's such a foreign thing to be able to look up at the sky and watch the sky dancing and moving like that. It doesn't get old, not for me anyway.
This is one beautiful image.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, so this is what I call quintessential fjordland scenery here, where we have the beach forest, these beautiful big beech trees, and then rising up with a mountain, the waterfalls tumbling off, and then, of course, a river as well. And these types of images here, I like to wear waders. Well, I don't like to wear them, but I do wear them. And this is getting almost waist deep in the river there, trying to just get that composition right. Waders are a game changer. Once I started using waders, I was like, wow, where have these been my whole life? It just makes it so much easier to get the right composition that you're after. And yeah, just the atmosphere and light coming in on this afternoon, it was pretty amazing. And this place, this type of scenery looks fine even on a grey, rainy day, just because you have those waterfalls coming down. But the way the light just broke through here was pretty special. And that's what I'm typically looking for with the weather. Is I love, as you guys are probably aware, it's always good to be at the arrival of an incoming weather system or there for the departure. And particularly in a forested landscape, in a mountainous landscape, the departure of a rainstorm, you get all the evaporation, and that's going to help create that atmosphere. So it's always a good time to head out. That's the type of thing that I look for.
Will, the previous one, that was a handheld shot, right?
Yes. So every photo you see here, except for that one, is handheld. So everything I show you is just all handheld here. Like I just don't use the tripod. It's not just saying that. I just don't use it.
I quit my tripod, and I think I was about to be expelled from the photography community. Right?
Mate, yeah, I know. I honestly, I don't use any ND filters, no grad filters. No polarizer. Just the camera and the lens. 2 lenses will typically do me, and that's all. And I think that's just laziness mainly. I just want to get out and get into the landscape. I don't want to be slowed down. And I just found I was able, without using a tripod, I could connect better with the land and explore different compositions more fluid. I could get into what a flow state where you're not really consciously thinking, you're just doing it. With the tripod, it's a hindrance for me personally. Look, there's limitations. Not everyone can do the handheld stuff. I happen to have a still hand, and because I use a stabilized mirrorless body, the Sony A7R series, that definitely helps. But I've developed techniques where even if I can't get the shutter speed without blurring the frame, it's very simple just to get the shutter speed for the water and then take a faster exposure for everything else. So let's say for this one, for argument's sake, maybe I shot at 1/10 of a second at f11, and that got everything sharp, but I didn't like the flow of the water. Well, I'd simply shoot at 1/10 and take the shot. Then without moving, I would just slow the shutter down to maybe 1/5 or 1 second, whatever it has to be, and just take those exposures. And yeah, there's going to be a little bit of movement, but it's not much. And it's obviously so much easy in Photoshop to just get those 2 exposures, put the 1/10 one there, and then I can just put in the exposure for my water and just blend in the water flow. To me, that just allows me to get compositions that you just wouldn't get the tripod into anyway, and just to be much faster in setting up and tweaking things. So that's typically what I do if I had to for something like this. But these days I'm finding I can pretty comfortably shoot at 1/8 of a second. 1/8 of a second is almost guaranteed it'll be sharp all the way through. And 1/8 of a second will get you this type of look on the water. And that's what I like. I don't personally enjoy doing ultra long exposure stuff where it's just completely lost all the texture. I like to retain some of the texture. So generally you can just do that with a single exposure regardless. But yeah, I try and encourage my clients on the trips to try without the tripod, just at least to know that if you forget the tripod, it's not the end of the world. Because I remember once upon a time forgetting the tripod to go on a shoot, probably a seascape shoot in Australia or something, and then just going, oh no, I forgot, and then just leaving because I thought that I couldn't get a shot without the tripod. And I get a lot of people who still have that same mindset where if they forget the tripod or a filter or something, then, oh no, I can't do what they would normally do. And you can surprise yourself at what you can achieve, and it's definitely worth trying anyway, for sure.
Yeah, I think you can go down to 1/5 of a second. Well, that's what I've pushed and seems to work. Okay, even 1/4.
Yeah, I've done a quarter as well, but I've learnt there's a few things that will determine if it's sharp. Number one, are you standing in the river? Like, if you're getting buffeted by a flowing river, that will affect it. The other thing is temperature. If it's getting cold, I've just found that the hands aren't as still. And the other thing as well is the heart rate up. Sometimes if I'm climbing up something or running to get to the spot and then I stop and the heart rate is flowing, I don't even bother taking the shot because I know the hands just won't be as steady. So you just learn over time. And I just always say to people, just check on the back of the camera because we've all made that mistake where you look at the back and go, yep, got it. Get home, put it on the computer and you go, oh no, what was I thinking? So I've learned over the years now, I never trust, but I remember one time doing 0.3 of a second handheld before. I think I was sitting down and just, in the right mode. A lot of my shooting is down low. So I'll often be maybe kneeling and I'll rest on my knee with my elbow, or I don't know. I don't really know what I do. If someone took a photo of me, I'd probably look like who knows what. It looks quite crazy, the techniques.
Yeah, there's one more technique. I don't know if you've tried it. It's, blocking your, so don't breathe and then shoot. Just block your breathing, then shoot.
Yeah.
The body.
I do that every shot, and I didn't realize I was doing it until I was trying to teach somebody, and I was like, oh, hang on, I hold my breath every time. Just like I exhale.
Yes.
And then.
Right.
Yeah, but it's a different approach, but I just find it so liberating. And I know Mark Adamus is pretty similar to me. The tripod is a burden. Don't really want to get it out unless you really have to. And yeah, it's surprising what you can achieve still. And even with the no filters, not really using the grads and ND filters to slow the water down or anything like that. I remember when I used to use filters, it was so time consuming to get them out and set them up. And of course, there's nothing wrong with doing that. And people, amazing photographers, you still use filters and things. But for me, it's just a bit of laziness. And I just didn't like the hindrance of, I felt like it was disconnecting me from being right in the moment. I didn't like all these things that I had to muck around with. I just wanted to get there and just create, just me, the camera, being right there. But there's definitely limitations. Sometimes, obviously, I can't really shoot in the blue hour, for example, because it's getting too dark. You really need a tripod in the blue hour. But most of my photos, there's always direct light source somewhere. I'm always shooting when the sun is still above the horizon, even if it's just a little bit above the horizon, because I just love light on the landscape. In a shot like this, you can see that. Obviously, blue hour shots, there just is no natural light. And I think that's why I don't really like, for me, doing astrophotography, because there's no light. It's all like a mid-tone, just a darker tone. I really like having some more contrast in the image and just having that light somewhere to draw the eye into the scene. So it's definitely limitations, and most of my images have a certain look and everything, and that's because of the approach that I take and the type of scenery that I like to shoot. But as I said earlier, that's the beautiful thing about the arts in general, is how it's all subjective and everyone brings something different. That's what keeps it exciting.
True.
When I went back to Australia on my last visit, I remember thinking, you know, I wasn't really interested in shooting the seascapes just because I'd done that for so many years. And then I thought, I might just try and have a look, a different approach. Instead of using the wide angle, do the slow shutter thing, maybe I'll try and go down with a 400mm with a 2x extender, so 800mm, and just see what I can find. And just on this particular morning, just the right elements all came together. And this, I think this was 800mm, this shot here, just looking up the coastline where these cliffs are, mainly obviously looking at the waves and the waves crashing and having the rock structure back here. And then those birds just happen to come through, you know, from the left-hand side. And yeah, just got really fortunate with the timing of it all. And it's just a good lesson for people there that you don't have to have the same approach to certain scenery. And you would have heard other photographers mention about just forcing themselves to try and shoot something with a different focal length for a change. And this is just one of those scenarios. And I really love, I love using telephoto lenses. I've used them obviously on the mountains for a long time, but then to apply it to seascapes is quite fun, very challenging, but really fun.
This is beautiful image. There's so much of energy in it.
Yeah, what drew me to this composition, actually, there's a cross here that's been engraved in the rock, and that just caught my eye as some kind of focal, you know, something to look at. And then the birds just come in, and I think I called this shot, no, I can't remember now, I'm on the spot, but yeah, it just felt really apocalyptic to me, just the way everything was all exploding, and that's that drama, I guess. This is some of the Fiordland coast here, really remote coastline, where Mark and I went to this location. This is the third attempt at shooting these sea stacks here, and we just weren't getting the right light. And this area of coast is just filled with amazing sea stacks for kilometers. They just don't stop. And we spent a lot of time extensively scouting and searching, and we were ready to, we tried twice, and then on the third attempt, we had to fly to this spot, and we're flying out and it's raining in the helicopter, and Mark actually said, "Nah, I'm done. We'll turn around, you know, there's no point." And in all fairness, it did look bad. And I think the pilot said, you know, we're just like 2 minutes away from where the coast is. Might as well just go that last 2 minutes. And I was kind of the same opinion. I said, yeah, might as well just have a quick look. And sure enough, as we hit the coast, the clearing was on its way, and we got down here. And as you can see, you've probably seen Mark's version of what we shot on this afternoon as well. It was just spectacular. And the light, the way it broke through, there was a rainbow behind us in the other direction. And it was just so rewarding because we spent a good amount of time trying to photograph this place, and a place that very few humans would have ever even been to, in all honesty. It was just like, it just felt like a reward for the hard work and effort, and just nice to feel like we somewhat did the place justice anyway, how remote this lost coast is. And the bird there happened to fly through. This is a JPEG, so unfortunately it's a little bit soft, but no, I can't zoom in any further. But the bird is a little bit out fuzzy, but I left it in because I just thought, oh man, like I saw him coming. My shutter speed was probably only 1/10 of a second, but because it was so far away, it still was sharp enough to leave in the frame. But the position is just one of those ones where, you know, instinctually you'd think, oh, he's put the bird right there. So I usually say to people, and the bird is legitimate. But you can see here, these waves, this was one of those scenarios where I was kneeling down. I had waders on as well, actually. And by the time I was finished with the shoot, I think my hair was dripping. I was just completely drenched, the camera. But that's just, yeah, I find I get to these spots, like I said, and I keep saying, no, I got it closer, lower, you know, more action, more drama. And then eventually, to get a shot like this, you're getting wet the second, or, you know, the 1/10 of a second after you push it, you then get hit. But that's sometimes, not every image, but sometimes that's the type of look that I like, is just that real evocative type effect. Or you could stand up here with a tripod and do a long exposure and get an incredible image as well. But I really love the waves and the texture in breaking waves and everything like that.
Beautiful.
So that place is accessible by only helicopter, or you can drive and reach there?
No, you can't drive here. The nearest road is probably, I think it's 80 kilometers maybe from getting here. And let's say you wanted to hike into a spot like this, you're not walking on a trail, you're pushing through thick forest, or you're going along the coastline. But this coast is just cliffs, and it's just completely impossible. So the only other way would maybe to take a boat around, a large boat, and the boat can't come into the shore because it's too rough. So then you'd have to have a smaller boat to get off that, and that would be another way to do it. But that's probably more expensive than using a helicopter. So it's these places, this is the only way to do it. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. And look, I don't really like taking a helicopter somewhere because it's, you know, nature. It's better to connect with it, hands and feet, and take your time and experience it. But it's just not possible in some of these areas. So we're fortunate that we can do this to some locations, and there's restrictions here with where helicopters can land anyway. In the mountains, there's some places that are wilderness zones, and the helicopter pilots don't have permission to land there. And that's a good thing. It's good that you can't just come here and charter a helicopter and land exactly where you want and take off. I feel like that's exploiting the landscape a little bit. But what's cool is being able to go to some places like this and create images and use that to maybe raise awareness about how rare and amazing some of these places are and how they should be protected. But on the other hand, you know, if you can fly a helicopter in there, is it really protecting it anyway? So yeah, these are just little conversations that I think about sometimes, about the ethics of using a helicopter to reach a place. So it's weighing up the good and the bad, I guess.
Nice.
One more here. This is, you would have seen photos of Milford Sound a lot of times. So in Fjordland, there's at least 14 fjords, major fjords. And Milford is the most popular because that's the only fjord that you can drive to. And it's pretty common here to charter a boat, and the boat will take you down the fjord to the ocean, and then you turn around and come back. And it's spectacular on a day where it's raining, for photographers anyway. And when I see tourists here and it's raining and they're a bit bummed out and they're deciding if they should go on the cruise or not, I'm like, definitely go. And they think I'm lying, you know, because I tell them how much better it is in the rain. But as a non-photographer, that doesn't really make sense. But truly is spectacular in the rain, because every waterfall that you're looking at here in this image does not exist on a clear day. There's only 2 waterfalls in the fjord itself permanently. But on the rainy day, it's innumerable how many there are. There is just thousands of them. So often, because Milford here probably takes me an hour and a half to drive to, But I live where I live. It's the closest town you can get to. I live in Tianau, and what Tianau is known as the gateway to Fiordland. We're just right on the edge of the national park here. So often, if I could see a really good storm coming in, a lot of rain, this place gets a lot of rain, up to 10 meters a year. It's just insane how much rain can come through in this area. So if I see a really good storm coming, I straight away try and get on one of the cruises here and just go out, and this is the type of scenery that you can get. But the beauty of this type of waterfall at the moment is there was strong wind gusts coming through. Kind of scary, the wind that can come through, feeling the whole boat that you're on shake in these gusts of wind. But what it does, it obviously creates this awesome waterfalls that some of them don't even end up touching the ocean. They just get blown back up into the sky. And I've got a lot of photos like that, but I never really publish them because it's hard to get the composition right with the waterfall and everything. And just for this one here, I felt like I at least somewhat met my objective of getting a composition and showing the mountain peaks, combining that with the beauty of the waterfall at the same time. But I've gone past this a lot of times, and maybe you can't see the top of the mountains because it's too cloudy, or the wind gust doesn't come through as your boat's passing by. So it's quite rewarding to finally capture this one after, kind of seeing it so many times, but never really being right there ready to compose and get the shot. But this is really typical Milford type stuff, the stuff that I like to do here anyway. It's really fun, and you just get completely wet. I did an interview recently, and they asked what's one piece of equipment that I couldn't go without. And obviously, aside from the camera gear, I've got a towel, like a microfiber camping towel, which is meant to be for drying your body, but I'm always using that. It's just in my car permanently on the passenger seat, because when I'm out here shooting in the rain, in the forest, wherever it may be, that towel is just draped over my camera. And then when it's time to shoot, I take it off and quickly fire a few. And it's just my little protective covering. And I know you can buy proper protective sleeves for your camera and everything, but I've told you already, I'm lazy. So I just like to use the towel. Really need to do it there. I think I have one more here. Maybe I don't. No, that's all I've thrown in there for now. Obviously, I've got a million others in the back catalogue, but they're just a few that I've put aside.
Well, I actually wanted to see one of your images, Exalted. I think that's got the Kia flowers in the foreground and the Sterling Fall.
Oh yeah, okay, no worries.
You have that?
I'll just stop sharing and then I'll pull that one up because I know which one you're talking about there. Yeah, that was on that first trip with Mark as well, going to that location. And yeah, I've been up there a few times now. Just an incredible spot. I don't like that photo much anymore, to be honest.
We do.
No, I don't like it. I need to. I would like to go back in winter and get another version of there. I just don't like everything that I did in the image. I'm pulling it up now, and I'll just grab another image that I'm thinking of as well, and then I'll bring them up.
This is like classic wildflower foreground composition.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, pretty rare. Not many wildflowers here, to be honest. And yeah, we get those little daisies that pop up in some of the alpine areas, which is, yeah, pretty fun to shoot, obviously, but very difficult, actually. Huge focus stack needed. I'm just pulling another one now as well. Bring them up. Probably would have been easier jumping on my website, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm at your website, actually.
All right, yeah, I'll pull it up. I can do it. It will be in the mountain section, but unfortunately, that's the largest, the largest part of the gallery. So it's going to be scrolling through. I'll share my screen. I've got it up here. Try and find the.
It's actually under waterfalls.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
Do you want to share it? I can't find the share screen button for some reason.
Oh.
Can't find the share screen.
Oh no, there we go. Yeah, sorry, I found it now. All right. You guys can see that now?
Yes.
All right. So you know the website better than me. It's in the waterfall. There we go. Not that one.
We admire your work, Will.
Nah, thanks. Thank you. Really, that does mean a lot. And it's amazing how photography's grown over the years. Yeah, so this is the one you're talking about. Yeah. Sutherland Falls in the background here, and that's the tallest waterfall. Officially the tallest. There is bigger. I've seen larger ones, but officially this is the tallest in New Zealand, 580 meters tall, that plummets off the lake up here. And then, yeah, we were just camped out on this ridge line across, and just a really cool perspective being able to frame up Sutherland with these mountains. And then, yeah, obviously using the wildflowers as well in the foreground. Really good fun. And just that, a bit of adrenaline. I remember this shoot, just finding a composition and thinking, yeah, this is the comp. But then as the light was really getting good, I changed my mind, like, nah, this composition's no good. I got to find another one. And I just remember being in that flustered. I just always seem to get myself in those scenarios. And I think it is just, I like working under pressure. I think that's why I like aerial photography as well. And being in the rain and things, because I like to work spontaneously a lot more than the planned shots. It's very rewarding to plan a shot and go and execute it and have that vision. That's definitely really amazing. But I love the rush of just being in the moment and just reacting to what nature throws at you. I find that really enjoyable and probably more rewarding than the pre-planned. But I don't know, they both have their pros and cons. But yeah, this was fun. And Mark's shot that he got from here was just one of my favorites of his work. Really incredible. There was another one I wanted to show you of the mountain layers as well that I didn't pull up in the other.
Summer or spring, Will?
I was meant to show you this one. The wildflower summertime, generally. I'll show you this one. This is a recent one here. Sorry, It's so small. I'll try and make it larger.
This is one of my favorites.
Yeah, thank you. Been to this certain location quite a few times, and on this morning said to the guys that I had with me, we might get a rainbow here. You could just see the cloud rolling in from the west and clear behind us. So obviously that's the perfect recipe when you have that moisture getting hit by the light. That's how you get a rainbow. And it started on this left-hand side, and then obviously it eventually just made that full arc, and it was just such a spectacle. And it lasted 45 minutes. It got to the point where everyone had stopped shooting, and we just sat back and just enjoyed the view. Phenomenal. And this image here was an absolute pain in the butt to put together. My philosophy still with the processing is similar to what I said earlier, where I don't really want to be sitting on the computer. For me, the enjoyment is being out there in the moment, capturing it. And I'm sure a lot of people relate to that as well. But every now and then, if you want to get that image and create that final vision that you have, you might have to spend time in Photoshop, whether it's a focus stack or a pano, whatever it is. And this was that scenario. Basically, what this image is made up of is the background. For me to sit here and do this as a single exposure was just not possible because of the lens. So I was on 16 millimeters. If I just sat there and did a single exposure at 16 mil, I could not get all the foreground in. I could maybe get the rainbow in, but no foreground. It's just too wide, too expansive. So it's a vertical panorama for the background. So about 7 frames vertical from left to right. And that was able to pick up the whole fjord then with the bow. But then, of course, the foreground was just absolute garbage because you're just doing a vertical pano, the foreground. So then the foreground was then just one of the single exposures just right there in front of the flowers. So just to piece this together, being the stitch pano for the back and then the foreground in the front, and just warping and trying to, the way the automated stitch did the pano was just so messy. This is probably the longest I've spent in Photoshop on a photo or probably ever. It probably took about 7 or 8 hours total, just back and forward, maybe do 1 hour today, tomorrow do another hour. And yeah, just took a long time to piece together. So when I look at that photo, that's the first thing that I remember is just...
On that photo, what was your transition point between the foreground and the background when you...
You tell me, what do you think? Can you pick it?
Grass.
Hopefully. Yeah, it's basically the transition. So this grass line here, where the mouse is, that was fun, tracing around these little reeds, I'm sure you can imagine. And then I used just where the mouse is running along here, around these plants, running along. Yeah, so you can kind of see it now. Once I start to point it out, and if you analysed it, you can somewhat see it. But the tricky part was definitely putting in. And look, to be honest, for something like that, I just zoom in at 400-500% and just start to manually mask it. And that sounds very daunting when you say that. You've got to zoom in, and it doesn't take that long. It's not that bad to have to do something like that. And this is maybe a scenario where a luminosity mask maybe would have helped you to potentially. The luminosity here, the brightness value of this with the background is somewhat similar anyway. So a luminosity mask probably wouldn't help much trace around that anyway. So it's just easy for me just to zoom in and just get in there and just start to manually do it. But yeah, sometimes that's what it takes. I remember when I shot this as well and had some guys with me, and it's a really strong shot to shoot down this arm with the waterfall. I'll just show you a quick image that I got here a year or so earlier. And I remember shooting that and thinking, oh, that would be the shot that's the one to process. I wasn't initially going to do the full bow shot. It wasn't until I stitched it together and then I thought, yeah, that would be crazy not to run with the full bow. So this is just looking down that right-hand side of the fjord. So we had images, and the guys got images with the bow, half of the rainbow just arcing over and then finishing here. And that just made a really cool shot too, because the rainbow is a good leading line. So it's just coming right in and stopping right in the middle of the frame. And all these plants are right there to use as the foreground as well. But because I'd shot this frame previously, I thought, no, I better stitch that big one together. And I knew it was going to be a daunting task, but yeah, it got there in the end. And some shots are just worth the effort, worth the time to take. And definitely processing the images gets more enjoyable the more familiar you become with whatever application you're using, because same as photography, you need to learn the technical side of it before you can unleash your full creative potential. And that's a little bit frustrating at first, because you just want to be creative and just get in there and create. But you have this something in between, which is the technology, the tool that you're using. But once you overcome that and just dedicate the time to learn, then that wall is knocked down and there's no more boundaries there. And then you can just create freely. And I'm really stoked to be at that stage now. And it's taken years to get to that point, but get to that point where you can go out and there's very few limitations. And when you first start, there's a lot of limitations because you just can't achieve the result. You don't know how, or maybe you might have an idea, but it's just too difficult. And it can become frustrating. But when you can finally get through that, it's really much more rewarding and much more enjoyable. This is just a forest one here for something different. I recently released a tutorial on this, the processing of this image here. This is the type of forest that I like to photograph, the beech forests, lots of ferns. And for me, this is my happy place. This is probably the rare times that I'm not doing the dramatic stuff is out in the forest here, because it's just so calm and serene and just a different environment and very, very enjoyable. It's not like it's heart racing stuff that I normally prefer. But being here and just you hear the birds and the gentle breeze going through the trees, it instantly just makes me feel at peace. And I found this tree about 2 weeks earlier and there was no light. And I thought, oh, that would make a pretty cool shot with some light. So I thought, hey, I should film a tutorial on the making of the image. And I went here 2 weeks later and I walked in and I had about a 5-minute window before the sun. There's a mountain behind the forest here. And yeah, it was a very brief moment in time. As I said earlier, I always end up in these scenarios where it's just a fleeting moment. But yeah, it worked out pretty cool. And what I enjoyed with this type of shot is it's always good to find some symmetry as much as possible when you can in the landscape. And I just enjoyed the symmetry of the way the light just hit these foreground ferns, mimicking the V shape in the tree. as well. And this is just it's a focus stack. So obviously I'm not using a tripod. So a handheld focus stack. So for the foreground, what I'll typically do for focus stacks is obviously you can do it manual focus and just shoot and adjust the focus ring. But if it's only 2 exposures needed, it's so much easier, in my opinion, to leave it on autofocus. And I'll show this in the tutorial. I just simply point down at what I want to focus on in the foreground and focus on it. Then when I recompose, I'm holding the shutter in. So it's still locked the focus on the foreground. So I shoot the exposure for the foreground, and then without moving, when I push the shutter again, it's then focusing on the background, and then I shoot that for the background shot. It's very easy just to get the 2 exposures in. I'll just, one last one, guys, just some newer ocean ones. So I showed you that seascape at the start there that I said I didn't really like that much anymore, the exploding wave. Some of my more recent seascape work. Oh, sorry, this is that one we pulled up earlier. I said about the name. Yeah, As This World Ends is what I called it. Had like an apocalyptic type feel. So the more recent seascape work I've done in the last 12 months is like this one here. So going for a little more atmosphere and just a different type of light, more direct light hitting the wave. Whereas that original one from years back, it was just a different color palette, basically. You know, it was a bright blue with the orange sky. I like these more earthly tones here that are a bit more muted. And that's at the same location, that type of stuff there.
And you finally ended up in Motukiki as well, right? I think I saw.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so this place is obviously famous, South Island, and I just never really went up that way before, and I went up back in January. Yeah. And yeah, just watching the weather, I had a client with me that I was showing around, and I could see that we'll probably get some good light here. The tides were right, you know, as I've told you, we've got to get that low tide here. And yeah, unreal. It's amazing, these starfish that are just they're just everywhere. There's so many of them. Sometimes there's just too much. They get quite messy in the foreground. Yeah, pretty amazing spot. Hard to shoot. This was at 16 mil, and it's this reef that you need to be on for the starfish is very close. So at 16 mil, it's really tight. I've recently started shooting with the 12 to 24 mil, and that would be perfect at a place like this. And I've used 16 to 35 pretty much my whole career. I've only started using the 12 to 24 probably in the last 3 months. And I'm thinking, where has this been my whole life? I can't believe I never tried it. I always assumed it would just be too wide, or I don't know what I thought about it, but yeah, I really enjoy using that lens. Yeah, guys, so I guess that's it. I don't want to bore you with too much other photos. One more Iceland one, just talking about the drama, and this one, this was scary. The ice beach in obviously in Iceland, sometimes you can go to this ice beach and there'll be no ice, just depending on what the tide's doing and what the carving of the glacier is doing as well. Right. And on this afternoon, we went there, and this piece here, these 2 big ones in the back, were 10 feet tall. They're giant. And I thought, man, they're just making such a cool circular type shape there. And just me being me, I wanted to try and get some crashing wave action. And the only way I could do that was I was lying across another piece of ice when I shot this. But what was happening was, as the water was rushing in, the ice would then start to shake. And it was just intimidating, because if you've been to Iceland before, the way the swells work there is just very unique. You get these sneaker waves where there might not be anything happening for ages, and then out of nowhere, a surge will come up. And you've probably seen the videos of people running on the beaches, just running away from the waves. And it really does that. So it's very intimidating sitting there trying to get that image. Just one more while I'm talking about Iceland, at Vik. On this occasion, we had winds, I think 125 kilometre an hour wind gusts coming through. It got to the point where it was just dangerous to drive the car. It was just ridiculous. And took the guys out on the beach here, and you couldn't even look in the direction of the wind, because the sand would you'd have a sandwich, basically. You have a mouthful of sand. So we had to sit down with our backs to the wind. And this is just a telephoto perspective of the huge surf that was coming through. But I love these moments. It's very hard to shoot in conditions like this, but this is where I have the most fun, when you can just really experience a rare, fleeting moment that's very different to what you normally get at a place like that, and definitely tough to shoot. And another example of that exact type of scenario was in Patagonia last year, where we went out in extremely high winds onto a strip on the lake, a section that hadn't been shot before, only by Mark. And to get this type of image here was incredibly difficult, because this is like a 150 mil perspective. So trying to hold the telephoto still at 150 mil, and this is a lake, it's not an ocean. So these waves, to be that size, you can imagine how strong. I've got a video on the phone, I'll have to send it to you guys later. But it was just that strong that you could barely stand up. We couldn't really talk to each other. There was occasions where you just had to put your hand on the ground and brace yourself. It was insane. But then to witness the morning light hitting Fitzroy and be able to, photograph waves, which you just don't obviously do in Patagonia because there's no waves generally. It was incredibly humbling, and yeah, it's so hard to shoot. Just shooting so many frames, because it's a focus stack as well. When you're at 150 mil and you're trying to use a fast shutter speed, the f-stop's going to be quite open, which means obviously you're going to have shallow depth of field. So then trying to focus stack that and do it all together, I just remember thinking this is going to be a nightmare to put it together in Photoshop, but more just, am I going to be able to achieve it? It's going to be very difficult. But that once again, that's just kind of the pressure that I like to operate under. There's a lot more fun. Definitely you have the doubt in your mind thinking, I don't think I did it justice, but yeah, super fun. Cool, guys. I'll shut up now if that's enough. If any questions or anything.
Odd. Really odd.
Yeah. These are something really amazing. What you shared last couple of images were iconic in a way that you do not use tripod. You are taking risks. The wind. We have witnessed these kinds of winds in Iceland, and if had we not been there, it's very difficult to understand what you're talking about. Merely mentioning the speed of that wind does not really give you that feeling.
No, and that's the hard part, isn't it? We all face that challenge of, how do I show people how it looked and how it felt and all those things. And the reality is no one will ever know except you as the individual, maybe the people you shared the moment with. And I think that's the special part, though, is that as the creator yourself, you will always carry that something unique when you look at that work. And that's what I love. When I look at my photos, there's so many things I don't like about them. It doesn't matter if I shot it 5 years ago or yesterday. I can always find flaws and things like, I could do this better, I could do that. But what I enjoy, and the reason why a lot of them stay in the portfolio, is the memories that go along with it, and just having that, being able to reminisce and think about how it felt and all that. That's truly special. And that's something that, you strive to put that in the piece. That's what we're trying to do there as much as we can, but you'll never be able to do it 100%. And that's okay. And that's cool that we can all do that. But yeah, it's the challenge. That's what we're trying to do, I guess.
Yeah, that's you put it very beautifully. And I have a lot to ask. So maybe a few questions, and there are a few questions on the YouTube as well. Anybody who wants to ask Prakash, Imagery, Som, anything right now? Because
you fire the questions right now.
See, there are a few thoughts. I don't know whether they are right now questions or not, because we could clearly see the transition that you had from the first wave crash that you showed and to the last wave crash that you showed again. There's a huge transition in terms of your skill levels and all, and that is pretty visible. And I think when you said that you cull those images, you delete old images, but you still need to keep a few because they are your milestones in your journey through photography. Now, I had some observation. One thing is, one particular question is that earlier you were in along the seashores and all, the seaside. Later on, you moved to the mountains. Where does your heart lie in terms of shooting either seascapes or mountains? Do you miss seascapes, being living near that, or you enjoy where you are right now in terms of photography?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm 30. How old am I? 32. So I lived 29 years on the coast in Australia and didn't really have the love of the ocean until I picked a camera up. But when I started photographing the mountains, that's what felt like home to me, particularly here where I live now. Coming here felt like home, and I have this love for the ocean that will always be with me. In the times so many sunrises by the sea, but for me, there's something about the mountains and looking up. There's something about looking up at, it's instantly humbles you, and it just reminds me of the bigger picture. And yeah, the ocean, it carries its own beauty as well. I'm thankful here in the South Island where I can get to a beach in about an hour. It's not really anything I would necessarily photograph. It's not really any subject there. But if I wanted to see, smell, feel the ocean, it's not like it's an eternity away. And I was telling you earlier that I went out last week to create an image that I've had on my mind for 12 months and failed attempts. And what that image is, it's a photo of the mountains in New Zealand, the Mount Cook and the beach. So that Patagonia image I just showed you with the crashing waves, I've managed to do that here in New Zealand only a few days ago, and I haven't released this shot yet. But just in processing it now, so I'm doing it as a tutorial as well. To me, it epitomizes my love of the ocean and the love of the mountains. I'm so excited about this photo just because, it's just combining the two loves in one single image, which I haven't been able to really do before, not on this scale. Really excited about it. But my heart is definitely in the mountains, and particularly these mountains, because we have the forests as well. And as a child, I was always drawn to when my mum would do a painting of a waterfall or something, the greens and the waterfalls, that always resonated with me. I'm able to experience both of that now. And where I look at home here in the kitchen window, we can look at the mountains, and every morning if I make a coffee and when I look at those mountains, and every day I'm saying it to my wife and my kids, they must get sick of me, but I'm like, look at the light, look what the mountain's doing. Or every day, and now my son, he's only 5, but even he's observing it now, and he says, oh, Dad, look at the light out there. And yeah, I just love the way light interacts with the landscape and the way the cloud can shroud the peak. And it's like, I might be looking at the same mountain range every day from my house, but it looks different every single day. And the ocean's the same as well. It's just every single wave, every single ripple is unique. They're both just so beautiful, but definitely not ashamed to say that home is in the mountains. And that was one of the reasons from moving to New Zealand, was that I would come here for photography and running workshops. And then when I'd go back to Australia, it got to the point where I felt like I was not going home anymore. I felt like I was leaving home. I'd be flying out of the South Island, looking out the window, thinking I should still be down there. Like, I really felt it in my heart, like I don't want to leave here anymore. And yeah, thankfully, and I mentioned earlier about my wife just being so supportive, and the lifestyle here is so different. It's very laid back and a smaller population and everything, and she appreciates that type of lifestyle, and for raising our kids and just for ourselves and everything. And just so thankful that she was on the same page as me, and now I'm able to live in the place that truly does feel like home. And it's just it's an endless canvas for me here as a photographer. I feel like I've been able to flourish and just extend my creativity far beyond what I could do in Australia. You can only shoot the seascapes so many times, and you can always improve, definitely. But here, it's just on a different level. And there are seascapes here too, but when it comes to what I have to work with, it's only limited by my imagination, really. And I'm just limited by time and what the weather's doing, essentially. I've literally got the map filled with just little sections all over the topographic map of, okay, maybe this, if I climb up here and climb to that section, and then all of them are going to be, that's 4 hours, that's 2 days. And and then when the weather strikes and I've got the timing, that's where I can maybe go and try one of these locations. And yeah, it just doesn't end. And to be honest, like, it sounds weird, but each night when I when I go to bed and put my head on the pillow, I'm often just thinking about what's out there and the way that I can try and interpret it all. And yeah, it's very fun. I love the exploring side. It just is so rewarding. You know, you don't even have to get the photo. It's just when you can look at something that you just haven't seen before, where you didn't know anything about it. That's just so that's unparalleled to me. I just can't find a replacement for that type of feeling. And maybe it's a location that you have seen before, but then you're there for some kind of rare weather event or something. And yeah, to me, it's almost like a drug. The feelings and emotions that it can give you, it's just such a good natural high. It's awesome. And that's what happened on that day one when I picked the camera up and went down and shot that first sunrise in Australia. It was like, whoa, why have I never done this before? Liberating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question, Will.
Yeah,
So
man.
it is related to your next big dream project or dream image. So do you have any dream image related to lightning? Because I'm very much fascinated by lightning, as I mentioned earlier. So like it could be like, I want to have a lightning with this kind of a scene or this kind of a like foreground or something like that. So
the two I had was the first ones were the lighthouse one and then the one in the Cathedral Rocks. They were pure visions and goals and was able to go out and get them. The challenge now is, as I mentioned, in New Zealand, you just don't get the same type of storms that we did in Australia.
Right.
We have had a few here, but what happens obviously in the mountain region is that the low clouds block the mountains. So it'd be really hard for me to conjure up some kind of lightning image. I did have one which was going to be in Australia. You've probably seen the Camel Rock and the Horsehead Rock seascape locations. You would have seen photos of those probably. If I showed you, you'd recognize it. But I was at the point where I thought, okay, I think I want to try get it at this Camel Rock. And that was a 5-hour drive from where I lived. And I thought, okay, I reckon I can get this, just got to really watch the weather and just drop everything and go for it. But now that I don't live there, it's just the percentage of getting it is just so reduced now. So no, I don't really have any lightning images in mind, to be honest, just because it's going to be too hard for sure, unfortunately. Right. But for you yourself, I encourage you to don't give up on it. When you see those storms coming, you just need to go for it, and you will get it eventually. Because I've seen it happen. Not even just with lightning, but just with rainbows. I've got rainbows at places where I tried to get the rainbow there and eventually got it. You can definitely get it. You just got to not give up, basically. Be committed.
Yep. Fingers crossed, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are a few questions on YouTube, William, and one is that, question is, do you by Utpal Deka, now, do you believe a stunning photo needs a stunning location or a landscape, or the skills behind the lens can make a mundane scene into a magnificent photo too? Now, I have an extension to this question that goes by your journey as a photographer, your entry into photography. Do you think that if it was not for your living near the shores, seashores, or maybe even mountains, you would have picked up photography?
I think I would have definitely picked it up initially because I wasn't really drawn to the seascapes at first. It was in the backyard, just flowers, the garden, the sky, just stuff like that. But living where I did with the amazing seascape locations definitely helped keep nurturing the skills and finding the enjoyment in it, and allowed for the growth. And then, of course, to this day where I live as well. Now, I believe an amazing, beautiful image that resonates with someone can be made anywhere. And being in lockdown for the past 8-9 weeks, I was just a few times just started photographing intimate scenes in nature. And I actually ran a local photography competition here in my town just for the locals, just to encourage them to maybe just take some photos on their phones, just to, encourage people to still get outside and look for the beauty in the smaller details. And for myself, what I found was, I probably won't put any shots in the portfolio necessarily, but beauty can be found anywhere. You don't always need the big green scenery. It's just the way that you interpret what it is before you. We've all seen amazing macro shots, abstract imagery and things like that. So I don't think that has to, because some people are living in cities or they're just not near amazing locations. But it doesn't mean that you can't go out and take a beautiful photo. It will mean you have to take a different type of image, but it doesn't mean you can't take a good one. If you don't mind, I'll just quickly show you a shot, just on the topic now, of something that I came across recently. And this is different to what I normally do, but these images here, this is a type of algae that was flowing out of near the lake's edge, and it just created all these colors. I thought it was natural oils, but I believe it's an algae. And when the light was hitting it on a certain angle, you'd get this magnificent color, just like you would in oil, when you see oil on the road or something and you get the rainbow colors, but this was all natural. So this is like a 200 millimeter perspective, and this is a bubble that is starting, the little bubbles would just pop out of the water. And that's myself, a little silhouette of myself taking the photo. And this is just a scene that is just on the ground. And if you didn't see it at the right angle, then you just walk right by it. It just happened to be taking the time to look closely. And I've gone back and I've got some new images from here that I like more than this type of one. But that's an example to me of where you can just have a smaller, intimate scene that doesn't have to be a grand landscape, something that the everyday person would look by. This is the same thing here. So that looks like, some kind of hard textured surface. But if we push that, what these little fractures are here is where it's separated on the surface of the liquid, just to try and give you a bit of an understanding of what it all is. So, you can definitely make a good photo anywhere. It's just going to be a different type of one. But look, when it comes to grand landscapes, stuff that I'm drawn to, if you're not near those locations, of course, it's going to be a lot harder, but it doesn't mean that you can't still make some good images and learn photography and have fun, for sure.
That's a wonderful answer because you can create images, but you need to still be at the location, at the right place for the right kind of image. Because if you're trying to shoot a wildlife, you can't be sitting in the cityscape and trying to figure out how to shoot a wildlife. You still have to reach out to go to those national parks there. So I think it goes true with every genre of photography.
Yeah, that's right. And if you're doing portraiture, you need to get the portrait subject and then different type of people to photograph, whatever it is. That's the challenge of photography. It's not like painting where we can sit and create. You need to go out or bring it to you, whatever it takes. And I sympathize with people that they can't get out for whatever reason. They can't afford to travel, and it's tricky, but it doesn't mean you can't find that beauty. It's going to be a different type of approach.
Yeah, true. There's another question from Avik Banerjee. He's saying, what's your viewpoint on moods in landscape photography? Is it necessary to develop a certain kind of mood as you progress in landscape photography?
No, it just comes down to what you want to achieve as the individual. Now, the style that I like to shoot and what Mark Adamus initially really pioneered, it's very popular for whatever reason. I don't know why it's popular. I just like doing it. That's why I do it. But there's no right or wrong. You can do whatever mood. And, I have a consistent type of look to my images these days. But that's not really a conscious decision. It's just the result of what I create. I don't edit something and say, oh, no, that doesn't suit my previous photos, so I'm not going to edit it this way. It's just I do what feels right, and then the result just ends up being very similar in as far as a mood is concerned. But, there's some amazing photographers that will maybe one day do a bright blue sky, middle of the day image, and then they'll do a real moody evocative shot, and then the next shot will be different again. And you can do whatever you want, really. It depends. If you're trying to make a business out of it and maybe develop some kind of business model, then perhaps you might start to think about that stuff a little bit more. But for most people, I can't stress enough just to do what feels right to you. And it sounds hypocritical because I picked up the camera initially through social media. That's just how I saw photos in the first place. But my approach and what I tell people now is don't get too caught up in the social media because it has changed so much and there's such an emphasis on likes and followers, and whether or not people are consciously analyzing that stuff or not, it all feeds in subconsciously, and it can affect how people do their art essentially. And I really say just don't get too caught up with it. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Just go out and do what feels right to you. Just like what I did. I feel like that really helped me because when I picked the camera up, as I mentioned, there was no motives. I never picked the camera up and thought, okay, I'm going to learn this and make a career out of it and start traveling and do all this stuff. I just picked the camera up and thought, this is fun. I want to be better at trying to capture nature. And I had that same mindset for all those years. And I had people saying, I was still making a little bit of income from photography, selling prints, doing a little workshops on the weekend, but I still had my full-time job and I had no interest in making photography full-time. I didn't think it was possible and I just didn't really want to. I was just happy doing it on the side and making better images or trying to make better images. And it wasn't until literally probably 2 weeks before I made it full-time that I thought about doing it full-time. And it was when my son was born. And when he was born, life obviously gets a lot busier once you have children. So I had a full-time job. I was doing photography as a very serious hobby and making a little bit of income. And I was even doing the occasional like travel, tourism, like influencer photography as well. I started getting those opportunities early on, which I don't enjoy doing now. I don't do them anymore, but back then. And then my son was born. So I was like, well, I was just trying to juggle so much. And that was the point where I thought, maybe I want to live a lifestyle that allows me more flexibility in my life. And then I made it full time. But because all the photography prior to that, there was no motives, I feel like that helped me grow as a photographer. It helped me really refine my skills and develop that appreciation and love for nature that you really need to be a landscape photographer. Whereas these days, I just personally, I've encountered a lot of people who have contacted me and said, hi, I want to get into photography and make it a career. What's the approach? And I almost feel like saying to those people, well, straight away, you need to not have that approach. Just forget about making it a career, because if you pick the camera up and think, okay, I've got to monetize this, it's going to taint everything you do from that point, because every decision you make, every image you make, every location you go to will probably have a motive behind it. But if you just pick it up with those pure motives of just wanting to take photos and try and do justice to what you're observing, I think that's really going to help. Now, I forget the original question. I hopefully answered it somewhere in there. But yeah.
It's important. I think that what you said is absolutely right, because we see every day that most people start well, but then they lose their way, getting all tangled within those tentacles of social media and of all those Instagram things. They start chasing the followers more, likes more than they are chasing their own photography or that elusive image that they wanted to create.
Yeah, and what happened with me, because I was an early adopter of Instagram, so I've got 2 Instagram accounts. If you search my name, you'll see 2 come up. The one I use mainly has way less followers than the other one. But what happened, the first account, it had a lot of growth early on. And in Australia, back in 2011 and 2012, let's say 2012, 13, I had more followers than celebrities. And I was probably one of maybe the top 20 or 30 in Australia. And back then I might have only had 50,000 followers on that account. But there was no one else hardly on there at the time. And that's how I started getting some of those travel jobs where I would travel and photograph destinations and then post the shot and tag the company. That's basically what it was, just marketing really. But what happened over the years, I could see how things were changing on Instagram and people were realizing, hey, that you can travel and make money doing this. And I saw just the style of photography changing and different motives. And basically what I did, I got to a point with that original account It got up to about 170,000 followers, but the account was filled with all my early photography. It had tourism jobs where maybe I went to Fiji and I had to post as part of the contract, obligations, X amount of photos. So it was just filled with all this. I had a little bit of what I do now, but then there was just random stuff in there, time-lapse things, just things that are all part of my journey. And I just got to a point, probably, it must have been about 2.5, 3 years ago now, where I just felt like photography, and you saw it in my images, how there's a bit of a distinct change in the look and feel. And that's why I just went, I don't want to have an influence or do any of that type of work. And I don't want to get caught up in relying on followers for my business. And look, it does help. Obviously, it's marketing. It helps me market my workshops and everything. There's no denying that. But for me personally, I don't like what it can do and how it can change mindsets and motives and everything. And that's one of the reasons why I started a new account. And I wanted to prove to myself that you don't need to have this high following to make a career out of landscape photography. I could have easily kept my original account and just kept on playing what I call like the game of just posting a certain style of photo at a certain time. And it would have just kept on growing and growing. And that account now could have been 500,000 easily. I remember having more followers than some of the landscape guys now that literally have 1 million followers. At one point, my other account had more than them. But I wasn't willing to, pay to get more exposure by getting features and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. And now it's all part of the advertising through Instagram anyway, and boosting posts. But yeah, it can really change the way you think about your photography. And there's no right or wrong. It's different for everyone. But for me, I just remember thinking that I'd rather make the images that mean something to me than have to conform to a certain genre or look just to try and, stay relevant or keep an account growing. But it's a tricky one, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's I think very well answered that, because this is where most of the photographers we see that getting caught up. And what you took a decision was amazing. That I think it's very brave to have taken that kind of a call. There is one interesting question. I think after that we will start winding up. Is that after you are done with making your dream picture, do you dream a new one or get into a photography rut? And if you do, then how do you get out of that rut?
I don't preconceive too many images. I used to a lot in Australia because I hit a point where I'd felt like I'd shot the best sunrises and the best sunsets, and then I just had to start planning, okay, how can I maybe take things to a new level and get the lightning, whatever it was. And in New Zealand, I've had a few images like that where I've preconceived the shot and then tried to get it. But mainly I'm just going off a general area and then going there and then seeing how nature speaks to me. I found over the years that if you go somewhere with this exact thing in mind, you actually close yourself off to the other possibilities. You could go there and be determined to get this perfect framing and this composition, but maybe there's a better shot just off to the side, but because you weren't willing to adapt and you're so caught up in getting that image. So yeah, look, to answer the question, now that this image I spoke about last week, that was the one and only. I remember saying to my wife recently, this is the one and only shot for the last 12 months that I've thought about. And now that I've got it, there's still a lot more, but none of them are consuming my mind like this one did. The rest that I have now is just, oh yeah, it'd be good to go here and see how that looks. Maybe go there when it snows, just things like that. But this one was very specific for various reasons. As far as losing the motivation, that's something that I've never struggled with. And I've had people that ask that question a fair bit. How do you get out of that creative rut? For me, the best way to get out of it, if you find yourself going down that road, is to go out in nature without the camera and just let it speak to you. And I've just found my inspiration 90% of the time, or pretty much always, is from nature itself, and just watching the way the light interacts with the landscape, just being intimate with nature, just going out there and just observing, seeing, smelling. I just find that I get inspired when I go out and I just feel like photographing it. if you find you're struggling with inspiration, I'd probably say don't look at other people's photos, because I know that can help. You go, oh, that inspires me to go shoot. But sometimes it actually can bum you out, because you're like, oh, look, he's got this cool shot of this mountain and I don't even have mountains where I live. And it can actually make you feel negative. I think the best thing to do when you're lacking that inspiration is to not think about photography. Watch an inspiring movie or listen to music that uplifts you. Go out in nature, go for a walk, get some fresh air. And for me personally, I found inspiration just flows from once I go outdoors anyway. But it's a hard one. It's definitely hard to sometimes dig yourself out. If you're not feeling inspired, then don't take a photo. Don't worry about photography. If you're going out forcing photos and you don't have the inspiration behind you, you're probably not going to create your best work. There's no need. We have the freedom. We're very blessed, unless you're doing this for a job and you have to go and photograph something. Landscape photography, it's basically your connection and relationship with nature. And if there's a period in your life where that inspiration's not there and the relationship dwindles for a little bit, then that's just a part of the journey. And eventually the inspiration will come again and you'll make up for that lost ground. So I think it's just accepting whatever situation you're in, but don't close yourself off from the possibilities of it. Go out and you might be surprised. And during the lockdown, I would go out a few times, as I mentioned earlier. I was photographing intimate scenes, leaves with raindrops on them, tight telephoto stuff. And I had so much fun doing that, and not a single one of those photos will probably ever be shared or processed. But it was so fun to go out there, and I didn't think I was going to enjoy it. I just went out because I wanted fresh air. I thought I'd take the camera, and then I was just looking through the lens and probably had a good 2 hours just shooting all this stuff. And I was like, wow, that was cool, just to zone out and connect with nature. And then that's it. The photos, might as well delete them, really. I might put them on the computer, and I thought, I don't really want to process them, but I had fun photographing it anyway. So that's probably another thing to try, and just head out with the camera and have fun, but don't put that pressure on yourself. Don't put the pressure on thinking, I've got to go here, I've got to get this shot, or maybe it's the social media. I've got to post something for social media. And this is what I keep mentioning about, don't get caught up in it. There's no pressure there. If you don't want to share something or create something, don't worry about it. Don't worry. Just do what feels right for you.
Fantastic. Another very, very well explained answer. Thank you so much, William. It's been wonderful having you. And I think I would like to wrap it up by sharing what I felt going through your session today. And I think it's going to be useful for everybody who's watching out there and who's going to watch maybe the repeat of this later on. Is that don't get caught up in, correct me if I'm wrong anywhere. This is my wrap up kind of analysis of the whole session. Don't get caught up in the gear mania that you need to have best of the tripods and ND filters and UV filters and polarizers and what they tell you on the blogs and vlogs, and you still can be a landscape photographer without using a tripod almost 99% of the times. And you can still be a fabulous photographer. Just follow your heart, follow your passion, follow your calling, find your own creativity, and do look for some inspirations here and there that will probably guide your vision initially. And certainly do not get caught up on the social media rut. I think if you do this, everything is possible. Your rising to fame through photography will automatically happen as you continue to improve in your photography and continue to dish out wonderful images one after another without really getting into that feel that okay, how much I'm going to win from this particular image, how much will I sell it for. That kind of thought process is going to divert you away from your creativity. So I think this is a huge learning for all of us who are actually getting overly influenced by social media and acquiring as much gear as we want, as we can. I think that kind of situation can always be avoided. And thank you so much again, and for actually accepting our invite and being here and sharing your journey very, very passionately through your beautiful images. And you know what stands out in your images is no use of tripods, because I realized, I was thinking all through this session, that our images look similar only because in every of the image that we have is probably we've used tripods and ND filters. And since you don't do that, you are trying to look beyond those things. So instead of getting limited by the use of these gears, you are trying to get more creative, and that's visible in your images. That's really amazing. So one last time, so what I will say is that just do the thumbs up so that I can do the I can take a screenshot, and last final screenshot. So thumbs up.
You want me to do one?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a wonderful session. Beautiful. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Cool.
Thank you, everyone on YouTube. It was one amazing session.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on, guys. Thanks for the opportunity. And I'm just a guy with a camera trying to share what I think is a beautiful world out there. So I really appreciate the time, and anyone who's listened today means a lot. Thank you.
Bye, Will.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers, guys.
Bye. Take care.